Welcome to the run-through of sections B and C of the Life Sciences Paper 1 for February-March 2017. Question 2.1. The diagram below represents the human female reproductive system. It's labeled, 4 parts are labeled A, B, C, and D. 2.1.1. Identify part C. There it is. 2.1.2, state one function of part D. That's D. 2.1.3, name the hormones secreted by part B during the first week of the menstrual cycle. That's B. 2.1.4, state how the hormone named in question 2.1.3 influences part D. And 2.1.5, during tubal ligation, part A, there, is surgically cut or tied. Explain how this procedure prevents pregnancy. Here is the fully labeled diagram. Identify part C. C corresponds to the vagina, and you write that in your answer book. State one function of D. D is the uterus, which carries the embryo and fetus during pregnancy, and you can also say it protects the developing fetus, contracts to push the baby out during labor, allows for implantation of the embryo, or contracts to push out blood or lining during menstruation. Name the hormone secreted in B. B is the ovary, which produces egg cells, and it secretes progesterone and estrogen, but in the first week it is estrogen. 2.1.4, you can now state how estrogen influences the uterus. It causes the initial thickening of the endometrium, or the endometrium becomes more vascular and glandular. Part A is the fallopian tube, which connects the ovaries to the uterus, transports egg cells from the ovary, and it is the site of fertilization. So preventing pregnancy is achieved by preventing fertilization. One way you can put it is that the ovum cannot move into the fallopian tube or oviduct and cannot be reached by the sperm, therefore fertilization cannot take place, or sperm cannot reach the ovum, therefore fertilization cannot take place. 2.2. An investigation was carried out to determine the effects of smoking during pregnancy on the baby's birth weight. Babies born weighing 2,499 grams or less have a low birth weight. The table below compares the percentage of babies with a low birth weight born to mothers who smoked with mothers who did not smoke in a certain city in 2009. First column in the table is birth weight in grams from less than 1,000. Second row, 1,000 to 1,499. Third row, 1,500 to 1,999. And the fourth row, 2,000 to 2,499. The next two columns are the percentage of total births in percentages in 2009. Firstly, for mothers who smoked, then mothers who did not smoke. So 0.7% compared to 0.2% of total births were under 1,000 grams. In the 1,000 to 1,499 grams, 0.9% were born to mothers who smoked, and 0.3% to mothers who did not smoke. In the next category, 1,500 to 1,999, 2.2% for mothers who smoked, and 1.1% for mothers who did not smoke. And finally, for the 2,000 to 2,499 gram category, 7.1% for mothers who smoked versus 3.2% for mothers who did not smoke. You are asked to 2.2.1 draw a histogram to represent the percentage of births in each weight group born to mothers who smoked. 2.2.2 why were babies that weighed more than 2,500 grams at birth not included in the investigation? 2.2.3 state a general conclusion for the investigation based on the data in the table. And 2.2.4 describe how chemicals from cigarette smoke are able to reach the baby's blood from the mother's blood. 2.2.1, here is the histogram, and let's go through it using the mark allocation. So firstly, the title of the graph has to have both variables, the percentage of low birth weight babies born to mothers who smoked during pregnancy in 2009. Next, the correct label and unit for the X and Y axes. The X is birth weight and it's in grams. The Y is births and it's in percentage. And lastly, you need to have the correct scale and width of bars. And lastly, the histogram bars must be touching. So for your scale, you see that the highest percentage is 7.1, so we only need to go up to 8%, and the width of the bars has to be equal for the equal categories. 2.2.2 Babies weighing 2,500 grams or more were not included because babies born weighing 2,499 grams or less have a low birth weight. 2.2.3 The result is that mothers who smoked had a higher percentage of births of low weight babies versus mothers who did not smoke while pregnant. So you can say the total percentage of low birth weight babies born to mothers who smoked was higher than those born to mothers who did not smoke, or the other way around, the total percentage of low birth weight babies born to mothers who did not smoke was lower than those born to mothers who smoked. Lastly, describe how chemicals from the cigarette smoke are able to reach the baby's blood from the mother. The mother smokes, inhales the smoke into her lungs, from there it diffuses into her blood, and the chemicals dissolved in the mother's blood are able to move across the placenta and through the umbilical cord into the baby's blood by diffusion. Question 2.3. Read the extract below. In a species of sea turtles, shown below, the females leave the water to lay their eggs in a nest on the beach. The female makes the nest by digging a hole with her hind legs, her back legs. A female is known to lay about 100 or more eggs. After the eggs have been laid, the female covers the nest with sand to hide it from predators and leaves the eggs to incubate on their own. It takes about 2 months for the hatchlings to emerge from the nest. The hatchlings must try to make it to the sea safely. Only about 10% of the hatchlings usually make it to the sea safely and survive to reproduce. Right, on the right we have a graph. The graph below represents the percentage of survivors in a sea turtle population over a period of time. Along the bottom on the x-axis we have the time in months, and up on the y we have the percentage of organisms surviving. There's a very sharp decline initially for the first couple of months, and eventually you see roughly 10% surviving. 2.3.1. Write down whether the type of reproduction in sea turtles is oviparous, viviparous, or ovoviviparous. 2.3.2. Give a reason for your answer to question 2.3.1. 2.3.3. The shape of the graph would differ if there were parental care. A. Describe how the shape of the graph would differ if there were parental care. And B. Explain your answer to question 2.3.3a. Okay, 2.3.1. Here is a revision of the terms. And if you look at the Latin guides, vita is life and ovum is egg. So the first one gives live birth, second one lays eggs, third one does both. So in this instance, your answer is oviviparous. And 2.3.2 asks you to give a reason, and that is because she lays eggs. So you say the female lays eggs. You can say in a nest. 2.3.3, the shape of the graph would differ. How would it differ if there was parental care? So you can jot on the graph what you think would happen, because basically more of them would survive for longer. So the answer for A is the graph will decrease more slowly at the beginning, or you could say not decrease as quickly at the beginning, or you could describe it as more convex. And B, explain why the graph appears that way. The offspring are protected by the parents for a longer period of time, therefore more of them will survive to adulthood. 2.4.1. Identify parts A, Part B, B, Part C, and C, Part D. 2.4.2. Explain how parts A and D together are adapted to amplify sound. 2.4.3. State one advantage of the middle ear being filled with air. Here's a labeled version of the diagram above, and that's part A, corresponding to the eardrum. Part B is the semicircular canals. Part C is the eustachian tube. And part D is the oval window, or the fenestra ovalis. Here is a brief revision of how hearing occurs in human beings. I'm not going to commentate on it. We'll go through the answer together. Okay, so 2.4.2. A, the tympanic nerve is larger or has a larger surface area than D, the oval window, or D, the oval window has a smaller surface area. Therefore, the incoming sound waves are concentrated to a smaller area, thus increasing pressure and amplifying the sound. And one advantage of the middle ear being filled with air is that it allows the ossicles or eardrum to vibrate freely. Question 2.5. Read the extract below. A link between concussion and brain damage. In 2002, a former American football player was found dead in his truck. The doctor who handled the autopsy discovered that the football player had severe brain damage and that his death was caused by repeated blows to the head or repeated concussions. He called this disorder chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. A more recent study was conducted which involved the brains of 165 people who played football at high school, college, or professional level. The study found evidence of CTE in 131 of the brains. This extract was adapted from Wikipedia and theatlantic.com. 2.5.1. The part of the brain affected by CTE is the cerebrum. State 2 possible symptoms of this disorder. 2.5.2. State one way in which the brain is protected. And 2.5.3. Explain why CTE does not usually affect essential life processes such as breathing or heart rate. Here is a diagram showing the parts of the brain and their functions. For 2.5.1, we're focused on the cerebrum, which controls voluntary actions, receives and interprets sensations from sense organs, and controls higher thought processes. So your symptoms of damage to that area would correspond to those functions. Loss of voluntary actions or paralysis could occur, loss of one or more of the senses, and you can give any example, loss of higher thought processes, and you can give examples such as memory, judgment, or problem solving. 2.5.2, you need only mention one of the following, either the skull, the cerebrospinal fluid, or the meninges, and if you want to be fancy, you can name all three. You will still get 1 mark, but a lot of respect. 2.5.3, the medulla or medulla oblongata transmits nerve impulses between the spinal cord and the brain, and it controls involuntary actions such as heartbeat and breathing. So since CTE mainly affects the cerebrum, the medulla oblongata is not damaged, therefore CTE does not usually show symptoms affecting essential life processes. 2.6. TSH and thyroxine are both secretions of endocrine glands, namely the pituitary gland or hypophysis and the thyroid gland respectively. 2.6.1. Where will you look for evidence to detect the levels of TSH and thyroxine in the human body? 2.6.2. A high level of TSH is detected in the body. Explain 2 possible causes of high levels of TSH in the body. Right, so 2.6.1, you're going to look for your hormones in the blood. 2.6.2, either the pituitary gland is malfunctioning and thus secretes a larger amount of TSH than it should, or the thyroid gland secretes less thyroxine than it should, and therefore there is no negative feedback effect on the pituitary gland telling it to secrete less TSH. Therefore, the levels stay high in the body. Question 3.1. An investigation was carried out to determine the effect of auxins on the growth of coleoptiles. The procedure was as follows. The tip of one coleoptile, young shoot, was removed and placed on a block of agar jelly, as shown in diagram A. After 2 hours, the agar jelly was placed on the cut surface of the original coleoptile, as shown in diagram B. The coleoptile was covered with a black box and allowed to grow for 2 days, as shown in diagram C. 3.1.1. Explain why the tip of the coleoptile was placed on the agar jelly for 2 hours at the start of the investigation. 3.1.2. Describe what occurred in diagram C to cause the coleoptile to bend even though no light was present. 3.1.3. Describe a control for this investigation. 3.1.1 is to allow time for the auxins from the tip to diffuse into the agar jelly. 3.1.2 is for auxins from the agar jelly to diffuse into the shoot, and it was placed on the left side. Let me run the animation and then run through the answers. Right, so auxins from the agar jelly diffuse into the shoot on the one side. You can specify that this is the left side. The cells on this side were stimulated to grow or elongate, and the cells on the other side did not receive auxins and grew more slowly. This uneven growth caused the stem to bend to the right. Question 3.2. The diagram below represents a typical Snellen chart that is used to estimate visual acuity, or the ability to see clearly. The extract explains how a Snellen chart is used. There's a diagram of the chart, and the explanation is that a person whose visual acuity is being tested stands 6 meters away from the chart. One eye is covered, and he or she reads the letters of each row aloud, beginning at the top. The smallest row that can be read accurately indicates the visual acuity in that specific eye. Visual acuity is expressed as a ratio, and the line designated 6-6 is the smallest line that a person with normal acuity can read at a distance of 6 meters. When a person is having his or her visual acuity tested to obtain a driver's license, special equipment is used that can represent the letters in different patterns, arrangements, and sizes. 3.2.1. A person is only able to read accurately to the end of line 5 at the Snellen chart. What is his or her visual acuity ratio? 3.2.2. Explain one reason why the special equipment, which can represent different patterns, arrangements, and sizes of letters, is used when testing eyesight for a driver's license. 3.2.1. We determine this person's acuity by looking at the Snellen chart and seeing what ratio corresponds to line number 5, and the answer is 6/12, or 6:12, or 6:12. 3.2.2. One reason the special equipment is used is because it looks like this, so you can't learn the pattern or arrangement or sizes or order, and therefore you cannot cheat. Question 3.3. Read the extract below. Tons of food thrown away each year. In South Africa, about 9 million tons of food per year is thrown away as waste, while around 13.8 million South Africans are food insecure. The drought that is currently affecting the country is expected to increase, this was in 2016, increase the number of food insecure South Africans. The food wastage costs the economy of South Africa about 60 billion rand each year. The table below shows food groups with their wastage costs. In the left column we have the food group, and in the right we have wastage cost in billions of rands. Fruit and vegetables, meat, seafood, and others are the food groups. Fruit and vegetables cost 23 billion rands of waste. meat 17 billion rands, seafood 8 billion rands, and the rest 12 billion rands. The highest volume of waste occurs when the food is being transported, especially over long distances. Packaging and processing accounts for the second highest volume of waste. Adapted from the New Age on the 1st of February 2016. 3.3.1. State 2 factors, according to the extract, that lead to the largest amount of food being wasted. 3.3.2. Suggest 2 ways in which shopkeepers can reduce the amount of food going to waste. 3.3.3. What percentage does seafood contribute to the total food wastage cost in South Africa? Show all your calculations. And 3.3.4. Explain 2 ways in which the drought is expected to increase the number of food insecure South Africans. 3.3.1. The 2 factors that lead to the largest volumes of food waste are when food is transported, especially over long distances, and packaging and processing. 3.3.2, shopkeepers can reduce food waste by reducing prices to sell more, sell locally grown products, thereby avoiding those long transport issues. Donate unsold food to charities so that it doesn't go to waste. Only buy quantities that they can sell so they don't have anything left over which goes to waste. Or use large refrigerators and storages to keep the food for longer and keep it from going to waste. 3.3.3. The contribution made by seafood is 8 billion rands out of a total of 60 billion. So you take your 8, you put it over the 60, multiply by 100, and you get 13%, or 13.3, 13.33 recurring, etc. 2 ways in which the drought is expected to increase the number of food insecure South Africans is that because crops will fail or farmers cannot plant crops, there will be less food
ways in which
produced
the drought is expected
and therefore
to
less
increase
available.
The number of food insecure South Africans,
and the decrease in supply of food
that crops will fail or farmers are unable to plant crops, therefore less food will be produced, or
contribute
decrease in supply of food
to the expense.
More food will have to be imported.
Making it harder to acquire.
Either of these will lead to food being more expensive to purchase. Remember that food security is availability of food and also access to said food. So crops failing will decrease the availability of food, and the decrease in supply or importing, making it more expensive, would make it less available. Question 3.4. The graph below shows the changes in the human population and the population of parrots, a type of bird, in a certain country over a period of 500 years. The graph is titled Changes in Human and Parrot Populations Over 500 Years. The unbroken line with the circle represents humans, and the broken line with the triangle represents the parrot population. The years covered are 1500 to the year 2000, and the population in millions is also given. And this is adapted from people.eku.edu. 3.4.1. When was the human population at 3 million? 3.4.2. Describe the difference in the trends between the human population and the parrot population since 1800. 3.4.3. Suggest 2 reasons for the trend described in question 3.4.2. And 3.4.4.
If the current rate of decrease in the parrot population continues, explain how the organisms that feed mainly on the parrot population would be affected. 3.4.1 The population was at 3 million in the year 1650. So you write that in your answer book. The trends in 1800 were as follows. The humans did really, really well, and the parrots not so much. There was an increase in the human population and a decrease in the parrot population. 3.4.3 Two reasons for the trend. Humans cut down trees, which are the habitat of the parrots. Humans probably killed the parrots for food or sport, or found them to be pests. Humans introduced diseases that killed the parrots, or humans introduced other species which use resources that the parrots would normally use. So any two of those answers, detailing the human impact and the result on, or the effect on the parrots. 3.4.4 What would happen to the organisms that mainly feed on the parrot? The organisms would probably migrate or die, as they would no longer have any food, or they would have to find an alternative food source if they do stay, and that will affect other parts of the food chain. Question 3.5 Describe how the excessive use of fertilizers by farmers impacts on the quality of water. And for 6 marks, you need to mention any 6 of the following. Fertilizers are washed into water bodies when it rains or due to excessive irrigation, and the result is eutrophication. The excess nutrients in the fertilizer cause an algal bloom. The algae block out the sunlight, and the water plants cannot photosynthesize. Less oxygen is released into the water. Plants die, and bacteria cause decay. This removes more oxygen from the water, and other organisms then also die due to the reduced water quality. Any 6 of those effects. Finally, section C. This is worth 20 marks and should take you around 20 minutes. Question 4. Nontobeko had been walking in the desert without water for 2 days when she suddenly heard a sound behind her. She turned her head and saw a snake coming towards her. She became scared and turned around to run away. As she was running, she tripped and fell. Describe how her body regulated water content during the 2 days, and describe how her balance would have been restored after she fell down. You have 17 marks for what you put into it, 3 marks for putting it all together, and no marks will be awarded for answers in the form of flowcharts, tables, or diagrams. So use them if you need to for drafts. Don't waste a lot of time on it though, because they need the words. Question 4 is marked for content and synthesis, where the synthesis contributes 3 marks according to the table I've put at the top right. You can pause the video and have a look through that, but I am going to read what I have put into essay form, and on the left are the many points that'll give you the marks. So, regulating water or osmoregulation. The water levels in her body are low, or she is dehydrated. Osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus are stimulated by these low water levels and send impulses to the pituitary gland or hypophysis.
which is then stimulated to secrete more ADH. This increases the permeability of the tubules / collecting ducts and distal convoluted tubules in the kidneys. More water is reabsorbed and passed into the surrounding blood vessels. This results in less urine produced, and this urine is more concentrated in order to conserve water. Finally, aldosterone is secreted by the adrenal glands to ensure more sodium ions are reabsorbed by the distal convoluted tubules. This increase in sodium ions in the blood causes more water to be reabsorbed into the capillaries to restore balance. Nope, not to restore balance. As for her balance, balance is achieved in the following way. The maculae in the utriculus and sacculus in the cristae and the semicircular canals are stimulated. This is all in the ears. They generate impulses which are transmitted through the auditory nerve to the cerebellum, where they are interpreted. Impulses are transmitted via the motor neuron to skeletal muscles to restore balance. So the content is going to give you 17 marks, with up to 12 for the regulating water portion and up to 5 for the balance portion.